So the question is, how do we encourage more introspection, strategic thinking, and very operationally minded organizations, very fast paced, who don't feel that they have time or really even the need to do this kind of work? And of course, that reminds me of the organization that I spent most of my career in, where everybody was into making decisions quickly and chasing the latest fire. That was what people felt really provided meaning for their lives. And so I know it's really hard to get organizations like that to be introspective and to think a little bit more about options and alternatives and more creative ways of doing things. So let me give you some thoughts. And I think my ideas all fall under the category of how do we get them to do this without them feeling that they're wasting their time or that they're having to somehow slow down their operational rhythm. So I think one thing that organizations like this might be amenable to is after action conversations, however brief. In fact, I think the term that appeals to organizations like this is a hot wash. Not really sure where that term comes from, but it was very common among military types in the U.S. Well, let's do a hot wash on this. And the advantage of it is, I think the reason why they call it a hot wash is that you do it as soon as possible after the action was done. You don't engage in a writing exercise. You don't hand out tasking and have people come back a week later. You just have everybody get together, maybe even in a stand-up meeting. These kinds of organizations, they love their stand-up meetings, and have everybody go around and say, what's the one observation you would make about what we just did? And perhaps you might have somebody recording those observations, not making too big a deal out of it. But the point being that the next time that you have an operation and then you have a hot wash, and again, you go through this exercise, if the same issue or a problem pops up again, well, then maybe somebody can say, hey, the last three times we did this kind of thing, this thing happened and it didn't go as well as we wanted to. Maybe we should ask Joe to look into it and spend a little time coming up with an advantage, or I'm sorry, a recommendation for doing it differently. I think, definitely what you don't want to do with this kind of organization with very fast operating rhythm is you don't want to form a working group. You don't even really want to form a tiger team. I mean, I don't even know where that phrase comes from. But for me, working group is a group that doesn't actually do any work. But so you have to stay away from all of that jargon and all that consultant talk, right? And you just have to approach it in as fast and mission related way as possible. And I think that's the key approach to organizations like this. Um, One thing that I like to do, and even the most fast paced organization has a need to socialize or banter in some way. Fighter pilots will get together, or pilots in general, military pilots will get together and have a conversation in the officers club after a particularly difficult series of missions. And even though they say they're not introspective, it is in that arena that they are actually more introspective than they might think they are. So the idea of having or using that occasional social bantering get together to listen for introspective comments and perhaps pose a question that might get people to be introspective, but your question is kind of sneaky. So you might say, what's the most hair-raising thing that's happened to you in the last month? Well, that's an adventure story, not introspection, but perhaps the stories that people tell will reveal something interesting about the organization that you as a leader could tackle later on. So I think I remember I had a group once, and this is well before TED Talks were a thing. And every once in a while, I would convene a TED, which stood for thinking, eating, and drinking. And then the whole time it was like a happy hour, and we'd get together and have, a beer or two and a snack or two. And I never had an agenda for those. People just shared what they wanted to share. But I found that that was also a useful way to kind of ease into introspection. So anyway, those are some of my thoughts. I'm sure some of you have equally good ideas, if not better ones. But I would say stay away from the jargon, do it as quickly as possible, and encourage people to tell stories about what they're doing rather than introspection. Because you know what? The stories reveal the the kind of the mood and philosophy of an organization in some ways better than actually purposefully trying to be thoughtful. Thank you.